All right, learners, strap yourselves in because we're about to do a deep dive into the financial system. And the best part is, you don't need some fancy finance degree to get it. We're talking Bitcoin central banks and how this whole thing is about to hit way closer to home than you might think.
And to help us navigate this wild world, we've got an expert who not only gets all the nitty-gritty financial stuff, but also sees the big picture trends that often go totally over our heads.
So get this, central banks, the big ones, the US, China, Japan, they're all laser focused on Bitcoin. And I don't mean just a little curious, I'm talking seriously analyzing it, trying to figure out what it all means.
Yeah, it's a complete 180.
Hmm.
We've gone from Bitcoin being this niche thing that only a few people were talking about to it shaking the foundations of the entire global financial system.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking about a new currency here. This is about the technology, the ideas behind it, a completely new way of thinking about money.
Okay, see, that's what really grabbed me about this article we're diving into today. They use this phrase foundational element, which sounds way more intense than just like, oh, hey, Bitcoin is pretty cool. But why the sudden interest from the big players? I mean, don't they already have those CBDCs, those central bank digital currencies? Why all the fuss about Bitcoin?
That's the million-dollar question. And the answer is all about the fundamental difference between Bitcoin and those CBDCs. Think of CBDCs like digital dollar bills. Sure, they're digital, but they're still controlled by governments, still under their thumb. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is a whole different animal. It's decentralized, meaning no single entity, not even some powerful government, can control it.
So there's no one person or group calling the shots with Bitcoin?
Nope. And that's what makes it so revolutionary. It's like this digital Wild West.
Okay, I'm starting to see why the big guys might be a little freaked out by this then.
You got it.
Especially with all this talk about self-custody. Explain it to me like I just won the lottery and suddenly need to understand this stuff.
All right, so imagine this. You win the lottery, right? But instead of letting the bank hold all those millions for you, you've got it all locked up in a safe, and you have the only key. That's self-custody in a nutshell. You're in complete control of your assets.
Okay, that makes sense, I guess.
Have you?
But I'm also getting a with great power comes great responsibility vibe here. Like lose that key and you're in trouble. Right?
Exactly. It comes with a responsibility. But here's where it gets really interesting, especially with what the article highlights. You see with these big players like BlackRock, the investment giant, pouring billions into Bitcoin, there's this push to move away from this whole self-custody idea.
Hold on, BlackRock is into Bitcoin now. Those guys don't mess around.
Nope, they don't.
Yeah.
And that's why this is such a huge deal. They're offering Bitcoin-related products to their clients, essentially saying, hey, this Bitcoin thing, it's legit.
Yeah, so that's good for Bitcoin, right? Means more people are taking it seriously.
It could be. But, and this is a big bit, the article argues that if these giant institutions end up controlling a huge chunk of Bitcoin, doesn't that defeat the whole purpose of decentralization? It's like trying to control a force of nature. You might be able to steer it a little, but ultimately it's going to do what it does.
So it's this constant push and pull.
Exactly. And that's why this deep dive is so important for you, the listener, because the choices we make now, individually and collectively, are going to determine what this new financial landscape looks like. It's a big deal.
No kidding. So how do we even begin to navigate this new world? The article seems to point to self-custody as a big part of the solution.
Absolutely. Remember that safe analogy. Self-custody puts you in the driver's seat. You have the keys to your financial future. You're not relying on someone else to keep your money safe.
Which is empowering, but also kind of intimidating. I mean, what if I lose those keys, metaphorically speaking? There's no bank to call and get a new one, right?
That's the trade-off. But here's the thing. The more people understand about self-custody, the more comfortable they become with the idea of taking control of their own financial well-being. It's about education, about understanding the tools and strategies to manage your own assets securely.
So knowledge is power, as they say.
Exactly. Because when you understand the intricacies of this new financial landscape, you can make informed decisions about where you want to place your trust in a centralized system or in your own ability to manage your finances. It's your choice.
Okay, so we've got central banks kind of freaking out about Bitcoin, this whole self-custody debate. For those of us who aren't financial experts, why does this even matter? Like, what's the big deal?
The financial world as we know it is changing and fasting. And what's fascinating is that Bitcoin is at the forefront of this change, whether governments like it or not.
It's like that line from the article, Bitcoin doesn't need a bailout, it is the bailout. That's pretty powerful stuff.
Exactly. And this deep dive, this is about giving you the knowledge to understand why this matters so you're not caught off guard when the ground shifts beneath our feet.
Because who wants to be caught off guard when it comes to their own money, right?
Exactly. And that brings us to One of the most alarming points in the article, something everyone listening should pay close attention to.
Okay, so we've been talking about Bitcoin being this potential game changer, but the article also mentions CBDCs. What's the deal with those? Are they not just another form of digital currency?
They are, but there's a really important difference. Think of CBDCs like digital dollar bills.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're convenient, sure, but they're still completely controlled by governments.
So what does that mean exactly?
It means they can track every single transaction you make with a CBDC. They could even freeze your account if they wanted to.
Seriously?
Imagine being told you can't buy something because you spent too much money on something else last month. That's the kind of control we're talking about with CBDCs,
Whoa, okay, I see why the article is calling this a potential threat to individual financial freedom.
right? It's a huge deal. And it highlights this stark contrast between CBDCs and Bitcoin. One is all about centralized control. The other is about decentralization and individual empowerment. It's like this battle for the future of finance playing out right in front of us.
So on one side, we've got governments trying to hold on to control with CBDCs, and on the other side, you've got this Bitcoin movement pushing for decentralization. Where do companies like BlackRock fit into all of this?
Ah, BlackRock. The article uses them as a perfect example of how this whole thing is such a double-edged sword. On one hand, they're pouring billions of dollars into Bitcoin, which brings legitimacy and stability to the market. It's like Wall Street giving its stamp of approval.
Okay, so that's good for Bitcoin, right?
Potentially. But here's the other side of that coin. If these giant institutions end up controlling a huge chunk of Bitcoin, doesn't that go against the entire idea of decentralization? It's like trying to harness a hurricane. You might be able to influence it a little bit, but ultimately it's going to do what it wants.
So it's all about finding the right balance.
Exactly. And that's why I think these conversations are so important, because the choices we make now, individually and collectively, are going to have a huge impact on what this new financial landscape looks like.
So how do we even begin to navigate this new world? The article seems to point to self-custody as a big part of the solution.
Absolutely. Remember that safe analogy we talked about? Self-custody puts you in the driver's seat. You hold the keys to your financial future. You're not reliant on someone else to keep your money safe.
Which is great in theory, but it also feels kind of risky. What if I lose those keys, metaphorically speaking? There's no bank to call to get a new one right.
That's true. There's definitely a learning curve with self-custody. But here's the thing. The more people learn about it, the more comfortable they become with the idea of taking control of their own money. It's about education, about having the right tools and knowledge to manage your own assets securely.
So knowledge is power in this case.
100%. Because once you understand how this new financial system works, you can make informed decisions about where you want to place your trust. Do you trust a centralized system? Or do you trust yourself to manage your own finances? It's your choice.
This has been eye-opening, to say the least. But I have to ask, what about the people who aren't ready to jump headfirst into the world of Bitcoin and self-custody? What does this all mean for them? That's the big question, isn't it? Like, what does this all mean for the average person?
It is. But that's the cool thing about all of this. Even if you're not about to run out and buy Bitcoin or turn your house into Fort Knox, this conversation is still relevant to you
How so?
because it's about awareness. This article isn't saying that everyone needs to become a cryptocurrency guru overnight. It's more like a heads up. It's saying, hey, things are changing in the financial world, and whether you decide to get involved or not, understanding what's happening gives you a huge advantage.
So it's like knowing which way the wind is blowing, even if you're not ready to set sail just yet.
Exactly. And I get it. Change can be scary, especially when it comes to something as important as money. But here's the thing about this whole space. It's like the Wild West of finance. The rules are still being written, and the choices we make today, the questions we ask, they all have the power to shape the future.
That reminds me of that line in the article that really stuck with me. It was something like, the biggest threat to Bitcoin isn't that it will fail, but that it will be captured.
Yes, and that's such an important point. What's the point of having a decentralized system if it just ends up controlled by the same old institutions? That's why understanding things like self-custody, even if you're not using it right now, is so crucial. It's about having options, but making sure that the future of finance is actually diverse and empowers individuals.
So for our listener who's been with us on this deep dive, soaking up all this info, what's the one thing you want them to take away from all of this?
The future of finance is being written right now, and you're a part of it. Whether you choose to be really hands-on or just an informed observer, the knowledge you've gained today is so valuable. Don't let it go to waste.
So what should they do with it?
Talk about it. Share it. Challenge it. The more we talk about these things, the better prepared we'll be to navigate this exciting and, yeah, sometimes uncertain future of finance.
I love that engage, explore question. That's what the deep dive is all about, right?
Absolutely.
Well said. A huge thank you to you for breaking down such a complex topic in a way that anyone can understand. And to all our listeners out there, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on all of this? Head over to our social media pages and let us know what resonated with you, what surprised you, what questions do you still have. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.